Friends, today I'm bringing you an opening that's going to win you many, many games. It's super easy to play, for starters, and it'll also bring you incredible results because people don't know how to play against it. That's the most important thing of all. We've seen this opening on the channel before, but today we're going to go a little bit deeper. We're talking about the bishop's opening, bishop c4. All right, we're used to, right? Playing knight f3 normally as a first move, huh? To attack this pawn to keep the initiative. However, bishop c4 as a first move is seen almost never in any game. That's why it hides so many secrets and has many points in its favor not having developed this knight to f3. We're going to see it next. I've brought you a board with coordinates today so you can follow me even better while I give my explanations. I hope you like this type of board with coordinates. If so, let me know in the comments because you know I always read them. All right, how are we going to play when we make the move bishop c4? Well, the most typical response for black is to play knight f6. Why? Well, logically, they're developing one of their four minor pieces, and also, and this is the most important of all, of everything, sorry, they're threatening this pawn here. In other words, it's the only developing move that maintains the initiative because it forces us to defend the e4 pawn. That's why it's the most used move. How should we defend this pawn? Well, the move we're going to use is d3. Simply put, we've developed our bishop. Now we can play d3 because we're no longer blocking its exit. Also, we're opening the way for our other dark squared bishop. Now, I'm going to explain the plans we have in this opening because you're going to you're going to like it a lot, even for playing in your tournaments, right? A totally logical move here for black is bishop c5. In fact, players with less than 2000 elo or less than 1800 elo usually always make the same moves, knight f6, bishop c5, as if it were an Italian game, right? That's why these two moves are the most common. Careful, they're good moves. They're developing in a natural way. We're going to continue developing this knight here. Knight c3. Remember well, when you play this bishop's opening, don't develop the knight to f3 for now, but the knight to c3. Why? Because we usually have two main plans that you have to remember in this opening. One would be the move f4, okay? If the knight is on f3, we couldn't make this advance, and the other plan would be the pin with bishop g5. We can use these two plans as it suits us. For example, if they castle directly here, a great move is bishop g5, pinning this knight on f6. You have no idea how good this move is. By not developing the knight to f3, we've gained a tempo, since now we're threatening to jump with knight d5, putting a lot of pressure on this knight on f6. This definitely looks very dangerous for the black pieces, as they'll have a hard time defending. I mean, if this pawn were on d6, they could play the knight from b to d7. But since this pawn isn't on d6, they can't come to defend this knight. Therefore, if they play d6, we could directly enter with this knight to squeeze them a lot. If they then play knight d7, our plan would be to keep pressing, and I'll explain that now. But first of all, you should know something that will give you goosebumps. What happens if they try to kick out this bishop? It seems pretty logical, right? If they kick out this bishop, well, we could play bishop a4, a very natural move to maintain the pen. However, here we have a wonderful move, the typical fishing pole with h4. In this opening, it works very well. It works very well. Why? Because by not having the knight on f3, we have a clear path to bring the queen into the attack. Very good idea. I mean, why, Chestercher, are we giving away the bishop? Just so I understand. Well, simply, if they capture this bishop, so you understand, if they don't capture it, then the pin remains active, and they've achieved nothing with the move h6. It's that simple, right? So what happens if they capture? We recapture with the pawn h takes g5, and then we're threatening this knight. The knight, which was the true defender of the castled king, not only defends the h7 square, but also these two squares, which are the queen's entry points. I mean, the knight is being threatened, and when it moves, the winning move is queen h5 with a tremendous battery. Rook and queen attack the knight, a knight that's gonna end up dying. And not only that, but here we're gonna deliver checkmate anyway. I mean, if they're careless, obviously, we deliver mate, but normally they'll try to escape. They can't escape with this pawn thanks to our bishop.
See?
This pawn is pinned. They can try to escape with the rook so that when we capture, they escape with the king. And then when the queen comes here, they keep escaping with the king. So there's a way to finish it very easily. Remember well, when they try to escape with the rook, all you have to do is queen takes f2. Sorry, queen takes f7. It's important to take here before the knight, forcing the king to move here now. And the simplest way to finish is by sacrificing our rook for the knight. Rook takes h7, check, forcing the black king to capture. And now, simply, thanks to our bishop, queen h5 would be mate, since the king couldn't escape through the back or the front. It's that simple.
E4 or E5.
We play bishop c4 first, okay? It's important to bring out the bishop first. Knight f6. We defend the pawn with d3, bishop c5, and now knight c3. Remember, if they castle here, the winning plan is bishop g5. But what if they don't castle? Let's say, for example, they play d6, one of the moves I see most in this position, since they've developed the bishop, oh, sorry, the knight and the bishop. Now they want to try to develop their other bishop and their other knight, and d6 seems perfect. It defends the center, clears the way for the light square bishop, and they can castle next. All of this seems perfect. However, this is where our f4 plan comes in. A very strong plan. Don't worry, if you don't remember the ideas and mix up terms or try bishop g5 or things like that, you'll still do well. This opening is played very comfortably. However, the strongest plan of all when they played d6, which, as you know, is a very popular setup for the black pieces, is f4, an extremely strong move. What does f4 threaten? Well, the threats here are simple, and in fact, we have two. One would be to capture here, for example, playing knight f3 and putting a lot of pressure on this pawn. Pay attention to the great move we have by not having developed our knight, because if we had developed this knight, the pawn couldn't move out, right? With the pawn on f4, we can place the knight behind it, and both pieces are putting a lot of pressure on e5, gaining a lot of space. Plus, we can capture, castle, and place our rook on this file, along with the bishop, to put tremendous pressure with all our pieces on this point. Alright, so that's one threat, right? Capturing. Another threat is advancing. This way, we trap the bishop on c8, which can't go further than d7. And not only that, but we gain a huge space advantage on the king side, right? So we have two clear threats. The first would be to capture, and the second to advance. That's why many people decide to capture. But if they capture, they'd simply give us a huge development advantage. We've developed both of our bishops to excellent squares. Then we'll play knight f3 and castle, and again, we'll have the rook in a very favorable spot. So, what's the move I see most often here when I play f4? Well, the move I see most isn't capturing or letting themselves be captured or anything like that. The move I see most is knight g4, a move they almost always try to pull on us. Many people are tempted to try this typical attack, similar to the fried liver, right? Or what's this attack called again? The Fegatello attack, right? Knight f2, attacking the queen and also attacking the rook. What they don't know is that this attack isn't good against the bishop's opening. They'll think we're playing something weird. We haven't developed the knight, we haven't castles, we have a pawn here in a strange spot. They'll think we're doing weird things, but really, they're the ones playing in a strange way. They're uncoordinating their pieces. They only have two, and with two, they won't do anything. We continue with the brilliant move f5. Why is it so important to uncoordinate the opponent's pieces? We don't care if they try the fried liver attack, attacking the queen and the rook, because here it's already too late. We have our pieces well coordinated, and the queen and bishop can join the attack, while their pieces can't get in anywhere. Here we would continue in the following way. They attack our queen and they attack our rook. We'll enter with the queen on h5, already too late for our opponent to defend. Thanks to our bishop on c4, which is very well placed, we're threatening checkmate in 1. They can't advance because it's pinned. Advancing here would be a huge mistake, because upon capturing, you couldn't recapture with the h-pawn since the rook is totally pinned. You'd have to recapture with the g-pawn. The king would be totally exposed to the file, and the variation would end up losing. That's why the most common move here to stop this point is short castling. At first glance, it seems like a good move, right? It defends both points with the king in the rack. However, they're already too late. There's no way to stop the attack from the white pieces. How should we continue? Well, here, the strongest response we have is the following. We bring one of our remaining pieces into the attack with a gain of tempo. Bishop g5, directly attacking this queen on d8, which practically only has two squares, right? Queen d7 or queen e8. It really doesn't matter to us where it goes. It makes no difference because we have a very clear dynamic advantage, meaning our pieces, pay attention now, knight, bishop, bishop, and queen are all attacking the enemy king. Well, it's true they can capture our rook, they can do whatever they want. However, we're already winning. We now enter with the piece we have left, knight d5. Many might think we're attacking this point, but no. What we're doing is, for example, we don't care what they do. Look at this. They have an extra rook and an extra knight. However, we have such an attack that they can't do anything. The winning move here is the double exclamation mark move. Whenever you want, you can pause the video to try and guess it. I'll give you 3 seconds if you want, so you can practice. And the key move is knight f6, double exclamation mark. Obviously, this knight must be captured for two reasons. It's giving check, it's gonna take the queen, and it's gonna give checkmate. One way or another, this knight must be captured. And once it's captured, there's no direct check, but there's the move bishop takes f6, pinning the enemy king, and quite simply, there's no move that stops this check and the subsequent mate on g7, for example. Knight to d6 attacking the bishop, we don't care. Queen to g5 check and queen to g7 checkmate. If you're more aggressive players, I recommend that when they play knight to f6 attacking this pawn instead of the one we just mentioned, d3 defending, you enter a very interesting variation that I once mentioned on the channel, though not in such depth. The move is d4. Very, very, very interesting. It's true, we're not defending this e4 pawn and they can capture it. But this is a mistake, friends, because after pawn takes pawn, d takes e5, this knight is going to be difficult to get out, huh? This knight is difficult to move back. For example, these two squares are defended by our great pawn on e5. Here it's covered by the bishop, here by the pawn. Here it's not covered by anything, but it would have serious threat problems. That is, if it tried to retreat now, we could come here threatening a lot, right? This knight has problems. So here, the most used move, according to the database, is bishop to c5 again. Very interesting. I won't tell you otherwise. They're threatening this f2 point again. Thanks to these videos, you're starting to lose your fear of these kinds of threats, right? Many of you will be thinking here that you should play, for example, bishop to d3, knight to a3, right? Trying to defend this attack from the black pieces. However, many times we just focus on defending when we actually have advantageous attacking positions. For example, here's an example, okay? You could sacrifice the bishop on f7, check, and now come in with the queen and you'd win back this knight. Therefore, winning an extra pawn. And not only that, but also the opponent's king would be totally exposed, right? This would be an example that you could win without defending this point here. However, sometimes there are stronger attacks that don't even need to sacrifice pieces. For example, directly, queen to d5. In variations of the Scotch Gambit, those of you who have studied it know that this battery with queen to d5 is very strong. We attack checkmate and we attack the knight. The intermediate move of knight to g5 defending doesn't work because we'd eliminate it and then enter on f7. That's why here the black pieces, for example, must castle. But what happens if they try to castle? That we can keep attacking. And how can we keep attacking? Well, for example, we could take this knight here. Very well. You'd be surprised to know what the most used move here is for the black pieces. The most used move of all is before castling to capture while giving a check. And that makes a lot of sense. I'm going to prove it to you because I'm sure many of you are thinking it. Here, when we play queen to d5 instead of castling, they realize they can make this check, right? Because we're threatening checkmate, yes, but if we're being checked, we must move the king. But that doesn't worry us because now we're still threatening checkmate. And once they move, we can capture this knight, right? What have the black pieces gained? A pawn, but now we're attacking a bishop that undoubtedly must retreat. And not only that, but now we're launching a tremendous attack on the enemy king. First of all, we develop our knight to f3, for example, and as we can see, all the pieces are coordinating to attack the enemy king. For example, here the most common move is c6, preparing two things: the retreat of their bishop, which isn't doing much anymore, and the possible, right? Move d5 to open up the position a bit since we have the king in the center. Makes a lot of sense. However, they're not in time. The winning combination here is as follows: Bishop d3, so that we're threatening checkmate. Often, the threats made cause weaknesses for our opponent. They have to weaken themselves with what move? With g6. Logically, here it wouldn't be possible. For example, f5 stopping the threat, because we'd capture en passant and the threat would remain, right? It must play g6. And what does that do? When they have the pawns on white squares, nobody defends the black squares. Therefore, the bishop could emer. Many of you will think bishop h6, a tremendous move. It certainly is, but here we're helping our opponent a bit. Much better is bishop g5, threatening a queen. We threaten the queen, and not only that, but here we practically have the game won with the next move, bishop f6. This is all starting to sound familiar, right? After the move d5, which is the most common, we bring the queen into the attack. I'm going through all this so you understand how to win, because if I just show you the three opening moves, you won't know how to continue. I prefer to explain everything correctly, and we're threatening queen h6 playing for me. Sorry, winning with checkmate. Here, the only move that stops it is h5. Here, I'm gonna let you think for 3 seconds about a wonderful move that ends up winning the game. Come on, let's see who find it. All those who want to do the thinking exercise can stop the video. The best move here is the brilliant queen sacrifice. Very hard to see, friends. Very hard to see. Queen takes h5. Obviously, they must take the queen because we're coming in with queen 8-8, checkmate. So when the queen is captured, look what a wonderful move, huh? Knight g5 and checkmate on h7 is inevitable. The king can't move to any square. And not only that, but he can't be given an escape route either. So here, whatever the black pieces do, we'd simply play bishop h7. Checkmate. Wonderful. Of course, we just studied that by playing d4, this more aggressive variation. If they captured our e4 pawn, we'd come out ahead. But the correct reaction for black is to capture the d4 pawn. Chess teacher, you can't leave without telling me how to play if they give me the correct reaction. Well, very well. Here we wouldn't recapture immediately. It wouldn't be a bad move, but I recommend a much better one, which is now knight f3. A much better move. Chess teacher, you're going crazy and now you're leaving the other pawn here. Our opponent is up two pawns. Well, now we can get one back, right? So technically, we're down one pawn. But in exchange for what? In exchange for tremendous activity. The queen is active, threatening the knight. So we have the initiative. This knight has to move. It can't be defended with d5 because we'd simply capture the pawn. So it has to move. We have the bishop and knight out, and we'll castle on the next move. For example, if they play knight d6, which is the most popular response to threaten our bishop, we castle short. The situation, we have two pieces and the queen active, and we've castled. Our opponent has all pieces on the 8th rank, can't castle yet, and the knight is slowing them down a bit. Black's best reaction seems to be knight takes c4, eliminating our bishop pair and a brutal bishop. However, here we would already have the game won. How about that? We already have the game won. The correct move isn't queen takes knight, though we'd still have an advantage, but rook e1, a great intermediate move. We check the king. How can they stop this check with two moves? Well, they can give up the knight, but that would simply delay their doom by one more move, right? They can play queen d7, queen e7, giving up the queen, a monumental error, but bishop e7 is also a monumental error. Why? Because it stops defending the g7 point. Queen takes g7 is going to win a game. Remember, for now, we're down a piece. Down a piece. They've captured our knight. Even so, we're threatening the rook, and now we finish it off with bishop h6. And as you can see, checkmate is inevitable. What do you mean inevitable, chess teacher, if it's well defended? No, because after queen takes f8, it's checkmate. The king can't take because of the bishop, and the bishop can't take because it's pinned by our rook on e1. Look how strong that rook pin is. The sharpest among you will have noticed that when taking this pawn, instead of knight d6, they can play knight f6, right? Which is a very natural move, and they don't get blocked at all. Well, don't worry, because I'll show you a quick plan that will always work for you. Remember the idea as well, because you're going to win many games this way. We come to pin this knight with this bishop, right? We pin the queen. Very well, our opponent can do anything. The most sensible, without a doubt, is to play bishop e7, defending against this very strong pin. Otherwise, we could start exchanging these pieces. Two doubled and isolated pawns on the f file? It wouldn't be a good idea. And now we change plans. Knight c3 for white. Not just to bring more pieces to the attack, which also, but to castle long, friends. Very good idea. For example, things you should know about this opening. If they attack your queen, where should you place it? If they attack your queen, you should place it on h4. Why? Because it's extremely difficult to drive away. They can't kick it out from anywhere. Something they try to do to me a lot is h6, a move that's useless because they don't threaten our bishop since the rook is undefended. Therefore, a better move here would be, for example, castling, right? Now they actually could play h6 afterwards, right? We castle long, placing the rook on the same file as the queen. Very good move. We're in a wonderful position, and from here on, we're making very strong threats. For example, bishop d3. You don't need to memorize all this, you just need to understand it so you can apply it in your games. We're threatening checkmate with the queen and bishop. Simply, what we'd have to do is bishop takes knight, removing this piece and giving checkmate. This is the most obvious of all. How can the black pieces try to save themselves from this situation? For example, by playing h6. Why? Because now, if we trade, what would happen? They wouldn't have queen takes h7 checkmate anymore, as this pawn would be stopping it. So, how do we continue? Well, in a simple way. This way, we can even sacrifice the bishop. Bishop takes h6, pawn takes h6, and queen takes h6. So that now, no matter what, checkmate will be inevitable. It really doesn't matter at all what they do to us. We're simply going to break in with all our pieces. They pin this knight? I don't care at all. I'm also going to bring in the knight, and you won't have any way to stop this checkmate. Practical example, if they come to take the rook, simply the only thing we'd have to do is enter with the bishop. If they take with the knight, checkmate with the queen. And if they move the king, well, we could also simply give checkmate in more than one way. But why complicate things if here, instead of entering with the bishop, we should think about which piece is in our way for the checkmate? The knight? So I'm going to eliminate it. If you capture it, I'll give you mate, and that's it. This knight can't move. And if they do anything else, it's really indifferent to us. So we'll capture the knight ourselves, and when they capture back, now we could enter to give checkmate. In this case, we do queen h7 checkmate, king f8, and queen takes f7 checkmate. I hope you loved this video. If you loved my way of explaining and all the concepts I've explained, I'd really appreciate it if you'd leave a like, which costs you absolutely nothing and makes me very happy. If you like this board with coordinates, I'll bring more explanatory videos with this board, since I love recording these types of videos, if you'll excuse the redundancy. Also, today I recorded sitting here at the table, so I've gotten much less tired than usual. I've been able to explain with much more clarity. I hope you loved this video, friends, and we'll see each other tomorrow, as always, with another new video. Goodbye.